Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve Ramona and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I'm thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, serving others, and yes, achieving success. We believe that when we approach our work and our lives with a servant's heart, we can truly make a difference. Who wouldn't you want to make a difference? I do. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to make an impact in your world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a community leader, or simply someone looking to bring more purpose into your daily life, this podcast is here to support you. And while you're listening to this incredible guest, and we've got a lot in common, so you're going to have a great show today, I want you to think about how you're going to serve today and what impact you're going to create with that service. And do it today. Let's not wait till tomorrow. And today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Picture yourself joining an elite community of thriving business owners from a variety of industries, all working together to create a powerful referral marketplace. It's an incredible opportunity to expand your network and elevate your business to new heights. If you have any questions, reach out to me and I'll get you more information. So a lot of you know, been with me a long time and know my history. I was part of health and fitness. I was part of a health club with my family from 78 to 2000. And this gentleman's followed the same journey with me, but he's really, oh my God, he's taken fitness to the next level. So I'm excited to share. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. Really happy to be here. Excited.
I almost
excited
called you
to work with a servant's heart here.
I love it. You have one too. I almost called you Mr. Geraghty. I'm like, nah, we're friends now. I don't need to do that. Let's talk about fitness. Let's start very broad because fitness and aging, let's talk about that. What you're trying to do and what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I actually started in the fitness industry right around the same time you did. I worked in the fitness industry way back in the early 80s, and I worked with some legends in the industry, Arthur Jones and Ellington Darden. And directly, I worked for Joe Cerulli, one of the great health club leaders in the world. And what was interesting is at that time, I'd always worked out, right? So I started working out like a lot of kids do in high school and playing sports. And so I worked out the way most people did. And then when I was getting interviewed for the job to work at this Nautilus club, I just needed a job, really, to tell you the truth, I just needed a job. We went through a 3-interview process. And the first part of the interview was you figured out whether they liked you and you were going to get round 2, But round 2 was a workout. And so round 2, they took you through a high intensity strength training routine. And I'd never really done it, right? I was working out at a Nautilus club, but I didn't really do high intensity. I would sit on the machine. I'd do 3 sets of 10 on a Nautilus machine instead of whatever. And so there was a guy named Rafi, and he was the trainer. And so he's taking me around to get all my weights and make sure everything's ready to go. And so, at the time I'm really fit. And so I'm thinking, man, he's going to be so impressed by how fit I am. And so he asked me, he's like, okay, so what do you do on leg extension? I'm like, I do the stack. And so the stack was 250, and he wrote down 180 pounds. And I was thinking, that's going to be a joke. And he's like, what do you do on the leg curl? And I'm like, yeah, I do the stack. And he's like, so he keeps taking about a third of the weight off of whatever I tell him, and I'm thinking, he has no idea what a stud I am. Right. And so he sits me down. Am I allowed to curse on your little thing?
You can do whatever you want. This is your show.
So he sits me down and he says, okay, so I want to get through on a couple of things that are really important. He goes, first of all, I don't give a shit how fit you are. That's not what this workout's about. We want to discover 2 things. We want to discover how well can you pay attention to instruction under stress. And I want to see how bad you want this fucking job. And in 15 minutes, he crushed me to the point where I couldn't get off the ground for about an hour. And so it transformed the way I thought about exercise forever. I no longer thought that you had to do a certain number of repetitions, or I understood that what really mattered is, had you challenged yourself, had you pushed yourself, had you gone to failure, so that you stimulated your body to get better. And so that through line has been with me for about 40 years now. And the way it shows up is after leaving the club and doing a lot of other things, I always worked out, and I'd find different ways of working out. But if they weren't really principle based, I try to think, how do I bring principles into this? How do I help understand, like, how do I stimulate or catalyze all these different systems of the body? And so eventually I came up with what I call fitness presence, which is an approach to exercise that I've been doing today, actually, is 7.5 years of doing it every single day. So I work out every day. It takes me 15 minutes, but it works on every aspect of fitness, and it doesn't require any equipment, and it's super safe. And so the reason it works, if you understand exercise, the reason exercise works is it's basically your body's just adapting to a certain environment, right? And so if you change the environment, you make the environment a little more demanding, then your body has to adapt to that expanded demand, and you grow capacity. And so if you think about, okay, how do I do strength, flexibility, balance, coordination, body awareness, resistance to injury, all at the same time, then you can shrink the amount of time you use, because you're doing essentially 10 things at once. And so instead of having to spend, 2.5 hours, I can do it 15 minutes. And that allows me to be really, really, really consistent. And what's cool is at 61, I'm in basically the same shape I was in at 22 when I was working at Teleclub, which is a fun thing to do. And so it's kind of how it works.
This is fantastic. 7.5 years, because what I love what you're doing with my background, that was the biggest thing. I don't have an hour to work out today. I'll do it tomorrow. And then guess what? 2 weeks go by and they haven't worked out, because the mindset is, I don't have that time. When you're take 15 minutes, if you don't have 15 minutes, you're never going to get in shape. I'll just leave it at that. Right.
So, yeah. It's a demonstration you don't care. Like someone might say, I don't have time. I said, is time really why you're not doing this? Oh, absolutely. So if hypothetically there was a way to do it this amount of time, would you do? Oh, absolutely. Great. There is. Oh, I have this other thing.
You've been in the health club industry. I can tell right away. This is so great.
You heard a little about health club sales in there.
Oh, yeah. It's so awesome. It's part of life. So again, I want to back up so the audience knows. So for 7.5 years, you've done your fitness presence for 15 minutes every day. Every 7.5 years. Every
single day. Yeah.
And you're in the best shape if you were in your 20s.
I'm physically, I'm 6'1", I weigh 195 pounds. I'm about 10% body fat. I'm as strong as I ever was. I have better balance. I'm more flexible than I've ever been in my entire life. I think I have greater coordination than I've ever had. My cardiovascular, I was just doing like one of those online, like what's your VO2 max? And based on what the thing, I'd be an elite athlete as a 25-year-old. And again, it's in 15 minutes a day. And so when people like, I haven't lifted a weight in 15 years, and somebody says, oh, you have to lift heavy. I'm like, no, you have to stimulate your body. Your body has to be challenged. So I can do that by fighting myself, pulling against. There's so many different ways I can create resistance. I don't need, and again, I'm not anti-weight. I just I don't think you need it. And I don't ever do it, because if I did it, then someone would go, oh yeah, but you did lift weights once a week, and that's why you're strong. I'm like, no, I never do. I never touch a weight. I don't even like it. Like if I'm doing a spinning class, I don't even do the light weights they do, because I just want to say, no, I haven't touched a weight in 15 years,
Yeah. Well, and I used to say in the industry, you probably get this. People, I want to lift heavy. Are you going to be a bodybuilder? No, then why lift heavy? Or a power lifter. Those are only two reasons to lift heavy.
And I would even go, to me, it'd be like, to be a power lifter, you have to lift heavy, because that's what you're doing. I don't even think you have to lift heavy to be a bodybuilder.
No, that's
bodybuilding, I think you probably saw this, right? It's almost all genetics. You know, it's almost like, wow, I want to be tall. I want to play more basketball. Like, nah, it doesn't really work that way. Like, you either have great genetics to build a lot of muscle or you don't,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so,
This is great. Oh my God, I love this conversation. Guys, and we'll get his contact information. You got to reach out to this guy because John's getting it. This is something that's been a problem for 100 years in fitness, is how to find the time. But we'll get into that later. What I love that you call yourself an optimal performance coach. Now you tie aging to that. Somebody may go, performance coach, optimal. Well, I'm a 60-year-old stockbroker.
right.
How can you help me?
Great question. And I pivoted to use the word optimal versus peak. And what motivated me, actually, I was listening to, and I'm dropping his name. He's one of the Navy SEALs that I think it was Rich Devine, I think might be his name.
That might be it, yeah.
And so he was having an interview with Andrew Huberman or Rich Roll or somebody along those lines, and they were saying, or Stephen Kotler, I think he was talking to Stephen Kotler, who does a lot of work in flow. And they were talking about, how do you get Navy SEALs to, peak perform all the time? And he's like, we don't peak perform. We perform optimally. He goes, sometimes when you're slugging through the mud and rain and you're exhausted and you can't peak perform. So we want to figure out, how do you always show up optimally based on the resources you have available in your environment? And I think that's the thing that if we can look at, I just want to be able to show up as my best consistently. And also, peak performance often to me means like the Olympic trials are going on right now, right? And they want to peak at this particular time. I don't have that in my life. I don't have the thing that I want to peak for. I just kind of always want to be great. And so, is it theoretically possible that if I did something different that, 30 days from now, I could be whatever? But if it took me out of my game so that on the 31st day or the 29th day or any other day, I was less optimal, then to me, that wouldn't be what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I like that, but also too, I'm a stockbroker. I'm 62. I have performance. I got to go on the floor and buy stocks, and I love that, because anybody, you're a doctor, you want to be optimal performing your job. Plumber, massage therapist, it doesn't matter, and that's what you do, and fitness does for you that people don't realize. I love that. Let's talk about go ahead.
I want to bring up, just because you brought up the idea of, so I have a background. I was a financial advisor, so I did that for a while.
Perfect.
So, and a lot of my coaching is working with financial advisors today. That's like a big chunk of my clients. And so one of the things you talked about, aging powerfully, brilliantly, and joyfully, and how that ties into fitness. For people that are in white collar careers, or people that have built careers where they're able to live in their zone of genius, right? So that you are doing the work that you love to do. The idea that we're going to choose some date to retire because somebody told us oh, but you're 65. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because I'm not a big golfer. I'm not a big fisherman. But if I were to go golfing or go fishing, the part of it that I would enjoy the most is sitting in the cart or on the boat having the conversation with the guy sitting with me, which is what I do anyway, right? That's what I do. I have those conversations. And so I try to help people say, hey, if you stay vital and pay attention to your health, we can age really well, right? I mean, I could have a stroke today, but because I have really good lifestyle choices, there's a really good probability that I'm going to be pretty highly functional into my 80s. And so can anybody else that basically has decent health, right? We can get pretty fit and stay really fit, 80s, 90s, etc. If you're doing something you love and you've built it to the point where you have an incredible machine, why would you shut that machine off, right? Why would you not continue to do the thing you love that adds a ton of value? And people are like, oh, I'm going to, get out and get into philanthropy, which is a great thing. But most likely the thing that you built that generates 7 figures, right? That thing, take some of the resources and give it to that place, because that's probably the place where you can add the most value. Now, you may also choose to take some of your time and your zone of genius and invest it in that space inside that philanthropy that you really care about. But I think we're aging way too early because we're not paying attention. We're making up stories. We don't have the time. And, as a society, we're aging decades early. And then we have this one challenge that we're not So a lot of people are not financially where they want to be because they haven't built themselves into a position. And then they get to a particular age and they're not really vital anymore. But the truth is you could continue to be vital another decade or so. And as a society, we wouldn't be extracting money because people haven't cared for themselves. So, I think there's a lot of things going on there that, staying healthy really matters.
No, it does. And nobody can argue that. It's just how they do it, when they're going to do it, how, why they're going to do it. Those are the things they have to answer. And it brings up this thought while you were talking so brilliantly. Have you heard, and I've heard this too, you hear, oh, somebody lived to a 101. I'll never want to live to 100. Yeah. You're the opposite of that.
Oh, yeah. I want to live as long as I can live vitally, right? As long as I can live vitally. And I was working on, are you familiar with the book, The 12-Week Year?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So anyway, I was doing some work on the 12-week year and recasting my vision. So I was like looking out at 75, which for me is like 13 and a half years from now. And so at that time, my two daughters will be 37 and 35. And I'm thinking, okay, at that time, my birthday's in October. I like to hike in North Carolina on my birthday because it's gorgeous, right? The trees are all leaves. I live in South Florida, so we go up, we go hiking. It's a little cooler. The trees are beautiful. You walk through the waterfalls. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm 75. I got one of my grandkids on my back, and I'm walking. I got two grandkids. I'm walking up the trail, walking with my grandkids. Well, in order to have that happen, you have to what do you have to do? So that's 75 for you, right? So that's just a natural consequence. That's what 75 is. And so thinking about the behaviors we need to have in order to get there, plus it just makes the whole journey way more fun.
Yeah. It's great.
And I mentioned Stephen Kotler. So I'm a big fan of flow research. I don't know if you're a big fan of that area, but the idea is, in a state of flow, you feel better and perform better than in any other state, right? This is psychological state. You have these great neurochemicals flying. Your neuroelectricity is really good. And so for me, exercise is one of the ways I get into flow really well. So I think a lot of people are missing out on this incredible experience where it really feels good and it jacks up your performance all day long. And it makes your life just way better. The return on investment is so high that it's just shocking. So such a small percentage of people do it consistently.
Flow energy is the most powerful energy in the world. When you're in the flow, and athletes you hear all the time, that pitcher saying, I'm in the flow, I'm just hitting there. The batter's like at the ball.
Right.
And we go on and on. I love that. Thanks for mentioning. So I love energy. I talk about energy, how you do, service heart's energy. When you serve somebody, it's going out there. The Prism of Perspective, it's a great title. Talk about that book.
All right. Thank you for that. So the Prism of Perspective, the concept is that, I'll show you guys a picture. So if you can see it, it kind of looks like I ripped off Dark Side of the Moon. But actually, they went ahead in time. They stole my graphics and put it on their album cover. No, I'm teasing. So you think about what happens in a prism. Light comes into the prism, and then it refracts off the sides of the prism, and it comes out as a rainbow. And so my metaphor here is that life is like white light, and white light contains all the colors of the rainbow. So life contains all of the different opportunities for our life. And the sides of my prism are beliefs. What do you believe to be true? How do you generate energy? And how do you remain present in the moment so that you make choices in alignment with your identity beliefs, your values, your purpose, your strengths, etc. And so out of that, depending on how you do that, you create a life that is energetically anywhere from experiencing life as a victim or a fighter, a negotiator, a contributor, a collaborator, a partner, or a co-creator. And so as you move up that stream, you begin to believe more in abundance, you believe more in safety, you believe more in the goodness of other people, you believe in an unlimited universe, right? And so as you shift up, we see what we expect to see. And so if your expectation, your beliefs are that people aren't to be trusted, it's a dangerous world, things are getting worse all the time, etc., there's going to be ample evidence for that, because there is ample evidence for anything you happen to believe, right? There's evidence for whatever you want to believe. And so understanding that, to me, makes sense. Like, okay, understand, like, what do you believe in? Is it empowering you? And if you come upon disempowering beliefs, challenge them. Like, say, oh, but I believe, and say, okay, well, so what evidence do you have of that, right? I understand that you've been telling yourself that story for a really long time. Is there some evidence that we're looking at that's really solid? Or is it just like, oh no, but I believe it? I'm like, okay. So beliefs, energy is the bottom part, is your foundational stuff: exercise, nutrition, sleep. The middle part is psychological practices, positive psychological practice, forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, visualization, breath work, meditation, things along those lines. And then the last part of energy is flow. How do you create flow in your life? And so we look at that. And then the backside is presence, which is self-awareness, self-control, situational awareness, and influence. And so those things work together to create your life experience. The book is a what I call a self-development novel. So it's a story about a financial advisor who's 7 years in his journey of getting sober, but he's just gotten an opportunity to get into this industry, and he's not going to hit his numbers. It doesn't look like he's going to hit his numbers. And so the managing partner, who happens to be his sponsor in AA, comes in and does an intervention, kind of like Scrooge, right? And so instead of being the past, present, and future, the intervention is, what do you believe to be true? How are you generating energy? And are you being present in the moment? And so he has these three different advisors, financial advisors, but they act like the ghosts, right? And they get him to see the world differently so that he can save his career. So that's the story.
I love the analogy with Christmas. That is very cool.
Right, it's fun. Yeah,
yeah.
I had fun writing it. So
yeah. And name of the book again, so people can get it.
It's called The Prism of Perspective.
And where can they get it?
They can get it on Amazon. The Audible is being redone, so that's not available right now. But the book itself, you can get on Amazon.
Okay, great. Real quick, the podcast. What's that about?
The podcast is, I interview people, or it's called The Prism of Perspective also. And so what we do is we look at people's lives and look at the pivot points where they take shifts, and we look at and say, okay, what were your beliefs? What motivated you to have that? You know, what were your fears? You know, what did you have beliefs around the world and it was causing you to behave in this particular way or the other? Or, you know, maybe you were struggling in a particular time and you had lifestyle habits that weren't really supporting you, or you were crushing it and you had lifestyle habits that were really supporting you. Like, try and figure out like what was going on in your world. And then also, you know, really looking at like, how do you stay present when something might otherwise trigger you, you know, expanding the space between stimulus and response, so that you can actually live in alignment with your values. Because if you think about the prism, like up here at the top of this size on beliefs is identity beliefs, and on the top of this size is self-awareness. And so it's like your identity beliefs and self-awareness come together so that you are actually aware that you're living in alignment with your identity beliefs. Like, what's your purpose, what's your strengths, what's your values, what's your, you know, vision. And so by doing those things, it pulls us together and allows us to live lives that are, you know, richer and more rewarding and
more enriching. Yeah, that's very, very cool. I like that. It's a story. It's your story, and you can change your story. That's the beautiful thing about stories. They could change.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got a little bit of time. We got a couple minutes left. I want to have some fun with you.
All right.
You willing to have some fun?
I'm willing to have some fun.
Let's do it. We had fun doing this show.
Yeah.
So you're going to a restaurant. There's a tabletop of 4. Uh-huh. You have one of the seats. The other 3 seats are filled by people dead or alive. And why?
And who am I choosing?
Who you're choosing?
That's a great question. So I want to have a bigger table.
You go.
But I mean, it would be someone spiritual. I'm not a religious person, but it could be Christ or the Buddha or Lao Tzu or someone along those lines. I believe they all taught a very similar message. And so I would want to have someone in those areas. I was greatly influenced by, you know, studying the Stoics. So, I mean, maybe Marcus Aurelius, would be one that I would choose to have in there. In present day, I think it would probably be great to have a conversation with Brian Holiday, right? He does a pretty good job in that space.
Oh, my favorite guy. Love
Right?
him.
Yeah, he's. Do you read his new? He's got a relatively new book out called "Right Thing, Right Now."
I getting it. Yeah, I haven't read
It's
it
all.
yet.
It's really. I mean, all his work's great. He's a great teacher, and I love what he teaches inside this book. Which would might be something I'd really like to learn about. Right? Is like what are those universal virtues? Which to me is much more important, than a religion. To me, I'm not. Different people have different beliefs, but I'm like, if your religion doesn't inform your behavior in a way that moves you more in alignment with values and virtues that you aspire to, like, what is its point? Like, I'm not strapping on some mascot to wear around and go, oh, I'm on team such and such. Like, okay, but how is that impacting you? So again, I might have someone from one of those mascots, right? Because I think that the reason that their faiths have expanded is that their teachings were really profound. And you go back in the same way, look at someone like Marcus Aurelius or someone more present day like Ryan Holiday. And I mean, it might even be, I think Stephen Kotler's really interesting. I'm a big fan of flow. I think one of his partners, Jamie Wheel, who was a partner of his, he wrote so I like that study. I believe that if we can learn to create high flow lifestyles, if we can think about getting crystal clear on our, what they call massively transformative purpose and our high hard goals, and to do it in a way that aligns with gives us autonomy and mastery and purpose, and we're able to do those things in a way that challenges our capacity on a consistent basis without throwing us into overwhelm, then we're going to have really joyful lives. We're going to be really productive. We're going to be able to serve at a different level than if we're not in flow. We're going to be more attractive. And so, yeah, if I could hang out with Stephen Kotler and Jesus or Lao Tzu, I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching. I mean, I think that book is fantastic. So, that might be Lao Tzu might be the teacher. And then Marcus Aurelius. I would really enjoy that.
Quite a different group. I love it.
Yeah.
Most important thing though is what food would you order?
What food would I order? I would order pretty healthy, organic. I'm not a vegan, and I'm not a carnivore. I would say a Mediterranean eater, right? So the kind of the Mediterranean diet. I like spicy food, so it would probably be spicy, and it would be very fresh and lots of spice. So it had a lot of taste. And I'm an alcoholic, so there wouldn't be any wine. We mentioned that it's 7.5 years. It's also 32.5 years since I've had a drink. So both of those things started on New Year's Eve. One 32.5 years ago, the other one 7.5 years ago, as far as the working out every day. So I'd probably have club soda with a bunch of lime in it. I would say probably what I'm having. And I'm also gluten-free, so there wouldn't be any bread. And I'm not gluten-free. My wife's in functional medicine, so I don't have any particular challenge. I just don't think it's really great for us. So I try, and then I'd say I'm 90% there, and 10% I eat stuff that I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's a good ratio. Well, I thank you so much, John. This has been
this has been fun.
Show. Great. How can people reach out to you about Fitness Presence, your book, or your podcast?
Okay, so the podcast is on all the different podcasts. It's The Prism of Perspective. The book is on Amazon. Fitness Presence, you can look up fitnesspresence.com. My other website, as you have right there, is courageousauthenticity.com. And that's where I do a lot of the coaching and things along those lines. And if you're interested in the Fitness Presence, I have a little way of introducing it where we teach the principles. We teach some of the principles, right? Because the real thing is like, what are you thinking as you're doing these things, right? Like, what do you believe? What are your beliefs? What are you trying to do physically? If you understand the physiology of it, the cool thing is that pretty quickly, you don't need anybody. You don't need a trainer. You don't need any equipment. You understand that your body can become the gym, and you have a different level of body awareness. And there's the rewards for it are so huge. So those are different ways of connecting with me. So
that's well said, the rewards. And think about that, because that's what keeps me going, is when you've lost a weight or you kept whatever, or you feel good when you wake up. So many rewards, so many rewards.
yeah.
Again, John, thank you. And everybody, don't
Thank
forget
you for
about my
having me.
TV show. You're so welcome. The TV show, Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Together We Serve. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Samsung, LG, all those TV streaming services. As I say, you'll see my big old noggin on a 70-inch screen TV, but I'll have a great guest. You'll learn, motivate, inspire. And as always, me and John, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. See
Thank you
y'all.
so much. I really appreciate it.